everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn Podcast. Today, we are going to talk about insurance, not your typical kind of insurance. We're going to dive into some of the Medicare issues. For those of you that are struggling with those choices, it's super confusing. So our guest today has a really cool story. He was just like us. He was in industry and then made a transition into the insurance world. So I'm joined by Tom Basey. After a long career as an engineer and project manager in corporate America in the telecom and medical device area, Tom's now an entrepreneur in the financial insurance industry. He's the owner of Basey Insurance. That's at basey-insurance.com if you want to go check it out while we're chatting. He helps people, small businesses, find cost-effective health insurance options and employee benefits. It's his pleasure to serve customers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and across the state of Texas, whether in person or online. What's more important than health insurance may not be the most important thing out there, but it's up there. So he works with major health insurance companies and healthcare providers to provide insurance options to individuals and small businesses. Because he works with many carriers, he's able to tailor solutions in terms of both features and costs, finding the best solution for each client. So, Tom, thank you for taking the time and joining us here on the podcast.
On the contrary, Michael, thanks for having me. And our challenge today is to make this fun and interesting. I look forward to us working through it because, to your point, it is important, but let's try to make it fun and interesting too. I'm glad to talk about it today.
Awesome. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs are people that want to get out of the 9-to-5 security. You know, when they stay in the 9-to-5, their most common thing is they go, well, I need to stay here because of health insurance. And I'm like, you realize you can buy health insurance as an individual, right? You realize you can buy health insurance as a small company. And it seems just so overwhelming, right? They're so afraid of the other side of the world, right? That they just stay in this 9-to-5 that perhaps they hate. We have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen and they're just like, we don't even know what to do. It's so confusing. Do I Obamacare? Do I not Obamacare? What if I have 2 or 3 people, right? So, and then there's the elder population. I know I helped my dad try to figure out like Medicare, and it was like Medicare, Medicaid, Silver Advantage, all this like Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D, Part Z, Part X, Part Y. And you're like, what? Why are there so many parts? Why isn't there just one, right? And I was totally confused. I consider myself a relatively smart individual, but I was completely overwhelmed by everything out there. So I am personally just excited to have you here and talk about this. Now, you made a really cool change. You were in industry, doing well, had a career, and we're like, yep, time out. I'm gonna change tracks. Talk to us a little bit about your story. Why'd you do that? What drove that change?
I will share that with you. Number one, guilty. I was in corporate America, and that was one of the main things for me too. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I could do to get out of there. So I was just like the person you described. That was me 4+ years ago.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, I was looking for a second career. I was tired also of the commute. Okay, I didn't like the commute, and I wanted to be able to be entrepreneurial. I didn't know what I was going to do. In fact, candidly, I was actually going to be a teacher. I'd taken all the coursework. If you have an undergraduate degree, local university, you get certified to teach. And so I did that. I did everything but student teaching. This insurance stuff kind of fell in my lap. So number one, I actually was a customer first, kind of like the hair club. I was a client first and then president or whatever. So somebody actually called me on a cancer specific policy. I didn't know that existed. I didn't know the statistics on cancer. So my point is I purchased a cancer policy to supplement what I already had in place because cancer is an expensive diagnosis and it's likely you'll get it. So I was a customer first, still in corporate America. Then I was approached about getting into the industry. And so I don't want to subject to the whole story. Another story I'll tell you is so I started selling supplemental insurance. Somebody came to my house to enroll my mother-in-law in Medicare. And I also didn't know what Medicare was. I didn't know what that was. And so I said, well, I'm going to sit down it would be negligent of me to not at least sit and make sure she's okay. And then I'll learn for myself because one day I want to take advantage of it. I don't know what that is. And by the end of that conversation, the guy was like, you need to be selling Medicare instead. And so a series of events have happened to me, but I'm telling you, I'm 4 years in and I really like the industry. I hate to use the words, the great resignation, because corporate America has been great to me and I love it. And I love all kinds of aspects of industries and stuff. but the prospect of being on your own is compelling. So I endorse
Mhm.
insurance as a career for someone to consider a second career as well. But we'll talk mostly about how to solve people's problems. So I needed to solve that problem myself. But that's the short answer is I was a customer first and I wanted to find out about it, and now I'm doing it full time.
It's really kind of cool, right? I mean, insurance has been. I can remember when I was in high school, and my mom went to an independent insurance agent to get auto insurance, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
had Mercury as our auto insurance carrier, and I'm sure they still exist, and they were great, right? But now everybody's like, you see all the big splashy ads, you see the Geicos, you see the USAA, which is hilarious that they generally advertise because you have to be related or a veteran, to qualify. Um, it, it's just kind of, it just strikes me like to have an independent insurance agent. It seems so, 20, 30 years ago, right? Like you just picture like, oh, if I need insurance, I go to Geico.
Mm-hmm.
Which isn't always your best bet, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe for like car insurance or renter's insurance, but like they don't offer health insurance. So I think when you cross that divide into like health and life, um, it just gets confusing for people. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
everybody seems pretty good on like health insurance or not health insurance, car insurance, home insurance. Like those are commodity kind of items. But
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about yourself and care for yourself or care for your family, that becomes
Mm-hmm.
deeply personal.
Mm-hmm.
What's the benefit of having like an independent insurance broker, versus the
Yeah.
exchange or something like that?
Yeah, or a captive agent for one of the. Yeah, so let me remark about this. So number one, there are, and I'm going to focus this discussion on Medicare because it's easy to talk that way. There are a bunch of major carriers in the U.S. and they do a good job on their solution. So they will provide a Medicare supplement for the different letters you talked about, or you can get a drug plan because you need both those perhaps, or you can do the Advantage plans. There's a lot of big carriers, and I like them all. As a broker, though, I'm appointed with all of those. And what happens to your point, I use the term tailoring. I will tailor the solution. And so what happens is, although they all do a great job, for example, simply the drugs that are covered, it's called the formulary, the list that they covered. Not every single carrier covers every single drug. So what I will do for person X is I will take their list of medications and I can actually compare that across both multiple carriers and even multiple retailers. And when I do that, I can really optimize the cost. So be it that or another one I might offer is doctors. Like the Advantage plan, everything you hear on TV about Advantage plans, I'm telling you this, it's a regulated industry, is true. There's things they don't mention. Some people really poo-poo the Advantage plans. I mean, I like Advantage plans and medicines. I understand the advantages of both, and it let one person actually get is the one they like. But my point is, when it comes to Advantage plans, they are network based. So that's one of the things
Mhm.
people don't like. So it's important that I check the list of doctors. And so to your point, uh, Jane Doe, John Q. Public, typically I'll take their list of medications and their list of doctors and kind of compare and contrast. And so you really can tailor it for somebody. So that's what I do. So that's the benefit. Now, if some you could get lucky, and if your brother is appointed with one of the most big major carriers, and all your doctors take that medication, and your medication is cost effective, then that's a good solution. But I like the brokerage approach and look at across different carriers and optimize it for you.
That makes a lot of sense, right? You can kind of pick and choose. I know that when I had my dad's, right, I was like, I just searched Medicare right on the internet. I just
Mm-hmm.
Googled it, right? That's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
This was the year 2000, way back when, and then I just poured over a ton. I was my own broker, right? I
Mm-hmm.
was
Right.
pouring over all the different plans and going, okay, what kind of care does he need? What kind of benefits do they have? And I was creating spreadsheets and just it was crazy the amount of time that I personally invested to try to make the right choice to help him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I never thought about like, hey, there's somebody who does this, and
Mm-hmm.
I can go tap Tom on the shoulder and go,
Mm-hmm.
hey, here's my dad's situation. Can you help me make a good choice here?
Yeah.
It would have been so much more empowering. I would have felt so much better because I had to become, don't take my Medicare advice because right, it's 22 years old at this point, but I had to become an expert in all that stuff to understand how to guide him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he was in a long-term care facility, so we were trying to figure that out, and all his drugs. It was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you said selling Medicare, right? Which also just kind of blows my mind. Like, I didn't know that people could. I just figured the government offers Medicare. You just get it when you're 65.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I'm not 65. I know I look like I'm 30, but I'm closer to 65 than perhaps you think. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you can sell Medicare. So, like, from a
Well, I don't show, let me clarify that. So Medicare was established by the government in 66 or so, and it really is health insurance for people 65 and above. Oh, there's some
okay,
exceptions, actually, if you're permanently disabled. But my point is Part A and Part B. Part A is hospitalization. Part B is outpatient, not hospitalization. So you can get that. So it's a red, white, and blue card. So it's like getting your health care from the government. That's what it is. Then what I do, and that's the thing, I can't do what I do until someone has it. So I assist in that process. I help someone get Medicare from the government. Then once they get that red, white, and blue card, then I educate them and explain to them the legacy way until around 2000 was you can get a Medicare supplement, which by the definition of those words, it pays for a lot of the things because Medicare doesn't pay for everything. That red, white, and blue card doesn't pay for everything. So you can get a Medicare supplement for a monthly fee where you paid a private carrier. So it will cost you something. Part B this year costs about $170 for most people to the government. So they can take it out of your paycheck. But that's not bad though. $170, that's not bad. Yeah, well, the thing is, Medicare, that part by itself, it doesn't cover drugs. There's no drug coverage at all. And then there's a series of copays and stuff. So the way that people address that is they either do a Medicare supplement plus the drug plan, or they do an advantage plan, which does have drug coverage included. And so I'm not going to drag down your discussion, your podcast to talk about too much, but that's the thing. There's a fundamental difference there. And one of the ways I might say is pay me now versus pay me later. And one's not necessarily better than the other, but it's important you understand which way they work and you pick the one you like. So Medicare supplements cost more per month, but they have much more thorough coverage, literally a lot of pocket cost. Advantage plans really are, like they say on TV, are available at a $0 premium from any of those carriers. But it's important you understand if you go to the hospital what your costs will be. So there is the good news, they have an out-of-pocket maximum. Medicare by itself doesn't have an out-of-pocket maximum. So at a minimum, I think people should get an advantage plan because that will address the drug coverage and it'll have an out-of-pocket maximum.
I love it. Um, you know, our seniors, and there's some smart as a whip seniors, right? My mom is 86 years old. She's more physically fit than I am. She has more energy than I do. She's insane. And mom, if you're listening, like, nothing but love here, right? But she struggles with like understanding all this stuff. Like, she'll come to me with a letter and be like, I got this letter from the IRS. Can you help me understand what it is? I got this. Can you help me understand what this is? What's changing with my benefits? She worked many, many years at at the Federal Reserve Bank, right? And so she has employee benefits that or retiree benefits that come into play. And just trying to figure all this out, right, is overwhelming still. How, how do you? It almost sounds like it's individualized, right? Like, you have to take every single person who comes to you and kind of look at their specific situation. There's no like, oh, well, if you're this, then you're that. It's almost, you have to go one by one.
I've got no argument for that. It's kind of like saying one size fit all. I mean, so what if you're going to go to a wedding? You can rent a tux. And I think the good news is there are series I'll do the 38 or the 42. There is some, but there's simply got to be a spectrum. And I think the other thing to your remark, uh, whatever carrier provides, and that's the thing I'm telling you, I like a lot of the major carriers in the U.S. that provide these solutions, health insurance, Medicare. They have either their captive agents or an independent broker will provide that. In fact, they're required for one thing. Again, I'll talk about Medicare. It's so regulated. It's easy to talk about in a certain way. One thing, there's something called an ANOC, an annual notice of change. So at a minimum, they have to send you out in advance. They say these are the things that change, if any. And so I like the fact that the government mandates that the carriers send that out, and it's regulated to the extent, for example, if you're going to enroll with someone, they have to document, it's called the scope of appointment. So if I sat with your mom and I was going to discuss Medicare plans, I have to write down and mark that. It's as the name implies, it's partially ensure that I don't do some bait and switch and sell her a burial plot or something else. The scope,
Yeah.
the focus only on those discussions. And if I come back next week to discuss with you, really, I've got to get that signed again. So there's some regulation in place that I like, but yes, it is. It's pretty. Or you can just pick the first thing. That's saying depending on the more plain vanilla your situation is, then the more you can take a plain vanilla plan, right? Now, if you don't take any medications and you don't go to the doctor, well, then it's easier. But once depending on the nature of the care you need and your medications, you want to optimize that by a plan selection.
Yeah, I mean that totally makes sense. The other area, right, that we kind of like struggled with was like dental, right? I was kind of blown away by like what's covered and what's not covered, right? Because I just figure we take care of our seniors. Our seniors get to 65, they've contributed to the country and such, and they're just taken care of, and that's very much not the case. There's a lot of things. It's almost like catastrophe insurance, right? It's kind of like, in the worst case, we'll cover a lot of this stuff. But you hear seniors like going broke and stuff all the time from medical bills because they didn't choose the right thing, or they didn't get enough coverage, or every time my mom goes to the dentist, it's hundreds of dollars, and I'm like, wait a minute, like don't you have dental insurance? Like, doesn't something like what is going on? Talk about like some of these ancillary care areas, like maybe dental and optical and things like that. Are those included or not? Or
All right, let me remark about that a little bit. Number one, I do want to say this. I've learned recently they're finding a high correlation between oral health and heart health. So I do think it's important that people go every year to do that. So if I look at the Medicare supplement side, Medicare supplement, when you get the Medicare supplement and you get the drug plan, there's still no dental and vision coverage. So that's yet an additional ancillary solution that I add on to people that want that if I do that. Having said that, some of the carriers, I tend to like a couple of the major carriers. I tend to like their plans more than kind of just the people that dedicated to dental. And that's my experience. One thing you mentioned Texas. I'm actually appointed in 10 different states.
awesome.
I'm not appointed in all states yet. I can get appointed as I need to. There's reciprocal license, non-resident state. But my point is, my exposure so far in the southern half of the U.S. is I tend to like these major carriers' dental plans rather than the standalones. That's my exposure. Having said that, the Advantage plan does have dental and vision included. Okay, there's some there. Now, in both those instances, often they tend to be more preventative. That is, that typically, if you have either one of those solutions, typically there's often a zero or small dollar copay for preventive, just going in and getting your semi-annual cleaning and checkup.
Right.
Often those plans do not cover, they may cover some basic dental, like maybe some extraction. Then some of them don't do some of the fancier things. Certainly, they typically do not cover, for example, orthodontics or dentures. Now, having said that, I want to go down that road. I'm going to go ahead and say this because it's interesting. If someone has Medicare and Medicaid, where Medicaid is a low income subsidy, basically kind of at the state level, where Medicare is a federal level health insurance. If you have both those, there are some Advantage plans from those major carriers. I call them supercharged because those people are low income, they get more stuff. So in other words, if I enrolled you or your mom, you might get a quarterly benefit for over the counter, which is nice in an Advantage plan, $40, $70 every 3 months, where you could buy some aspirin and antidigestives and basic stuff. If you're on a dual plan, which has both Medicare and Medicaid, a dual plan, you may get $100 a month that you can use for food and or over the counter things. That's nice. And then your dental plan, instead of maybe $1,000, maybe $2,000 of coverage, you can get $5,000 coverage, and often dentures will actually be included as something that is covered in there. So I guess the answer to like everything you're saying, there's a spectrum of solutions.
It's just like, I feel like without someone to guide them, they're just going to miss all these options, right? I mean, you kind of mentioned like these providers, right? If I Google Medicare insurance, I'm going to wind up on a provider site. I'm going to be like, oh, this looks good, and I might sign up, right?
Good.
Not knowing that hey, I could also get some supplemental plans. I could round out my coverage, and I just feel like coming off of, I know my dad, who was a union gold card carpenter, right? So had insurance through the union and such, goes into Medicare, and and the difference between the plans, right, or my mom, right, who stopped her career and retired, she's been retired for over 20 years. She was used to employer plans, right, and all the
Mm-hmm.
benefits that came from the employers. And back then, the employers really took care of
Mm-hmm.
their employees. Probably a little less so now. They're
Mm-hmm.
passing a lot more of the cost down to their
Exactly.
employees. But back then, they absorbed most of it, so it was free or relatively low cost. You had pretty great coverage, and your employer took care of it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go into this senior world, and it's just like it's almost like you're standing at all these crossroads, and you just don't know what road to go down, and you think you make, like my mom didn't know she had silver sneakers, right? And then she found
Mm-hmm.
out, oh, I can go to a gym and I can work out for free, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
get all these other cool benefits. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think they explore what they get, right? They don't understand what they get. It's very confusing, and so I just love what you do. From a forget the financial aspect of like owning your own insurance company, because I'm sure there's an upside there, but it's
Mm-hmm.
got to be just gratifying to help these folks at this time in their lives, move down a path. Like it's just got to be like soul gratifying.
You're doing this interview for me because you're articulating what I say to people. So that's the thing. At the end of the day, I tell people I just help people. That's what I do, and literally I am. And so, and let's be clear, I help. Not only do I help the Medicare beneficiary, which they call the insured, but I'm helping their kids or grandkids. Sometimes I call myself the Medicare detective because often potentially they don't know, right? That person doesn't know whether they have an Advantage plan or Medicare Supplement. So one, I'll help the people figure out which one they have. We can look at the cards that they're carrying in their billfold to figure out what they got, and then I can explain to the person what's going on. Because unfortunately, sometimes these people get incapacitated or something like that. That's a real challenge, right? If they don't know, and their kids or their grandkids or whoever has power of attorneys. So yes, I help people all the time, and it is very gratifying. And then I guess the other thing I would offer, kind of what you're hinting at there in the industry, the people don't pay me either. The carriers actually pay me. So that's the thing. I'm not no. If I'm helping you or your mom or whatever, you're not paying me anything. Actually, I get compensated to provide these services by the different carriers. So that's good. So yeah, I'm really helping you folks. Mm-hmm.
That's really cool, right? Because that was going to be my next question. I was scrolling through Tom's site over on the other monitor, going, okay, what does this cost, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it'd be cool, right? I mean, everybody over 65 should reach out and go, hey Tom, can you give me? It's almost like a health check, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, here's
Yeah.
what I think I have. Could you help me out? And then just what a cool thing to be like, sure, let me see what you have. Let me see what you need. Tell me about your situation. That consultative like process to get to learn about, seniors. Seniors are one of my most favorite um, segments of life, right? Maybe because I'm approaching being one myself, but
Mm-hmm.
they're just such amazing people with such amazing stories. I just think this country doesn't necessarily do all they could to honor those folks and just listen. I had a gentleman on who was an entrepreneur, has a great website, and he records and captures right their stories. It was a legacy app, and I just thought, how cool, right? What a cool concept to have seniors tell their stories so that the future generations can hear that. And here you are, kind of in one of the most important aspects of their lives, right? Making sure that they have the appropriate coverage so that they don't wind up in some financially devastating situation. And we
Mm-hmm.
hear it all the time, right? We hear like, and I always just kind of wonder, like, how did they get there, right? How did this person who has Medicaid get, an illness or such, and they just get, financially devastated because they didn't have the right coverage or such. Like it
Mm-hmm.
seems like such an important crossroads.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to share a couple of things based on what you remarked, and you can decide what you want to hear more about. So number one, I think it's compelling to remark, to reiterate, I love my time in corporate America, but you said it exactly. Costs are getting passed, and so my point is, most people working, you get your health insurance from your employer. Well, one, the homework I give to your listeners, you don't know, go find out what is your deductible. And it's because it changes every year. It's hard to keep track, right? So they should go and find out what is your deductible. And make sure you understand the implication of that is you have to pay that out of pocket before your health insurance kicks in. So that sucks. I call it the deductible monster. Most people don't even recognize the deductible monster, and they have one. So, like, for example, pre-COVID, since the number, I don't know the exact numbers post-COVID now, but pre-COVID, the average medical event in the U.S. in 2019 was $6,000. And so my point, that's just the average. And so my point is, well, what if you, Michael, have one that's $4,000, a little below average, fine. But if your deductible is $5,000, that's all on you, right? In other words, so it's important to know what is your deductible, what no deductible is, and know what that is. So everyone should go and find out that. And then the other thing is there's co-insurance. I'm going to use the number 80-20, but it varies. That is traditionally, even once you have insurance, you still got to pay 20% of it. So if you have one of these big, expensive, let's use the number for easy round number, $100,000 hospital bill. Well, let's call it $105,000, and let's say you have a $5,000 deductible. So you have to pay the $5,000. Now there's still $100,000 left. You have to pony up 20% of that in the 80-20 rules. That's still $20,000. So that's how people get there. Unfortunately, health care is expensive in the country, and health insurance doesn't cover everything. And so that's how people, unfortunately, there's a number. I don't know the exact number, but a lot of bankruptcy is due to healthcare costs. So that's one thing I want to share. The second thing I want to share is cancer. 1 out of 3 people, that's how I got into this. I'm just going to share a few useful stats. 1 out of 3 men or women basically can anticipate a cancer diagnosis in the U.S. these days. The good news is the most common forms, which are prostate for men and breast for women. The good news is we're at over a 90% survival rate. So we're making progress against cancer. But the bad news is it's expensive. So that diagnosis on average is $20,000. So my point is, one might consider getting a $20,000 or $40,000 cancer policy, or have some way to address it. There's other ways you can do it. You can do it through life insurance too. But my point is, the next two are more expensive, which is, and it's not gender specific, colorectal and or lung cancer. Those are $50,000 and $60,000. So it gets more expensive. So it's unfortunately one of those 1 out of 3 chance of getting it. So those are some not fun numbers, but I felt compelled to at least share those. So I'll stop there. But that's to answer your question. That's how health can leave you destitute.
So, we've been talking a lot about seniors and their health insurance, but let's kind of go back to the entrepreneur, right? That the person who's like, oh, I'm going to start X business, right? Or side hustles are a big thing right now. And sometimes your side hustle is so successful that you're like, ooh, I need to go do this side hustle full time because I'm making more at my side hustle than I am at my main, job. And the number one, it was crazy, right? I was talking to a podcast guest yesterday who helps entrepreneurs develop their business. She said the same thing. The number one pause that people have is, I'm going to lose health insurance. And it paralyzes them, or they're like, okay, my spouse can't come on this journey with me. They've got to keep a job so that we have health insurance, and I'm going to go off and do this, and I'll just be on their health insurance. But people can get health insurance and continuing coverage on an entrepreneurial journey, can't they?
Yes. You can either get it as an individual. There are different ways to get major medical insurance, which is what most people are familiar with. You can get major medical insurance as an individual. To your mark, you can get it through the marketplace, and or there are actually plenty of small business solutions. And so they're a group. And so that's the thing. Individual, as the name implies, is just one person. Group is you get a group disc. It's bulk pricing, if you will. You can get pricing on it. So there are small business solutions for sometimes up to 2 or 3 people, as small as I should say. And so yes, you can get. So if you and your mom started a business, potentially you guys, and maybe that doesn't apply because she's probably cheaper on Medicare, but you know what I mean. If you and a spouse or sibling, whoever started one, you could get a small group policy, or you do it individually. Yes, those are available. And then in addition, these days, intriguingly, in addition to major medical, there are actually some alternative solutions. Without belaboring the point, like an example I will get is you can actually buy a policy. You're paying a monthly premium to get a prepaid debit card that, as long as it's medically necessary, you can use that and pay for expenses. And it's kind of like some of those, you've seen these for drugs. People haven't seen them as much for insurance, but you can actually you can take your phone app and say, all right, I broke my forearm, so I need a forearm set and cast. And using this app from this carrier, they'll show you, all right, well, you can go to this doctor, this guy's charging $450, this guy's charging $500, this guy's charging $550, and they say, we're paying $500. So if you go to the $450, they'll actually put $50 back on the debit card. If you go to the guy that's charging $550, they'll actually hit your credit card for the $50 more because they're paying for 50. And typically that solution costs less than half of what the comparable individual. So there's some intriguing, and you see some of these things on TV. That was kind of an example of how that works. My point is there is a spectrum even for that. But yes, my message to anybody considering entrepreneur, there are health insurance solutions in one form or another for individuals or groups.
Cool. And then the next thing that they always say is, oh, well, it's unaffordable, right? They're worried about individual or small, without just saying, healthy 35-year-old male non-smoker. Like what is it? Is it like $10,000 a month? Is it like, I mean, people have these astronomical numbers, I think, in their head, right? Because we've just been scared. Health insurance is expensive. Your employer carries the burden of the cost, which I'm telling you, folks, is not the case anymore. Employers have had to pass more of that cost on to you. Your benefits give you, a great co-share. You should ask your employer, what's the employer cost versus the employee cost of benefits, and you should understand that as your total compensation package, which is more than just your salary, right? Your employer does pay part of your benefits, but are these numbers like astronomical, or and I know without a specific case you can't give like a quote, but like what's a range for an individual looking for health
Let me
insurance?
do some generalized. For one thing, even geographically, this will vary, right, state to state. But I'm just going to make some generalizations because I've quoted some things in the past couple of years. A young, healthy person in their 20s only cost a few $100. It's really not that much, and that's if you're doing the individual one. Now it can get into multi. In fact, the older, what's unfortunate about it is you approach, but you can't quite get on Medicare. As you're getting into your 60s, it can get very expensive. So that's where you hear those numbers. So you can exceed $1,000 a month for a person the older they are, because that's the thing. The insurance carriers, they're just like everything. They're in to make money, so they charge more. A healthy person doesn't cost as much because their cost of their care won't be as much, right? So that happens. So it can vary for a few $1,000s to, yes, you can exceed that. So it can be expensive the older you are. What I would offer, though, here's the thing: you're talking about this. If you start a small company, potentially you can pay the 3 employees or whatever, and you can split it. For example, one of the big major carriers I represent as a good example, they require the company to pay at least 50% of the premium. So the company could do, like I've got one customer that does 75%, but my point is even at 50%, well, then, for example, I've quoted some recently, it was going to be around $300 for an HMO for the employees, but then you split that in half, and the employee only pays $150 a month in for that. Now the company, of course, is paying the other half of that. And so to your point, I love companies that pay that for their employees because they show they're taking care of them. That is a business expense that they can potentially write off, and the business gets something out of it because it's retention. Then the employees are going to stick with you. What's the cost to train another employee and onboard them? So it's cliche, but it's a win-win. The employee wins because they get their benefits at 50% of the premium, if you will, and the company wins because they're showing goodwill to their employees, and candidly, the employees tend to stick around too. So I like that.
Yeah, benefits are important. We struggle. Our consultancy is about 180 so on people, and every year, as a leader on the leadership team, we struggle with the benefits, right, and the costs, and we have a broker who's doing a great job, and we're switching benefits constantly. Okay. We switch dental plans. We're moving around because it makes a difference in retention. It makes a difference in attracting folks. I could go work for this small company, but the benefits aren't so great. Or I could go work for, IBM. Well, the buying power that they have drives their benefit costs down. So they have, really low cost benefits. It might not be as good, or it might be on par. And usually what I love now is everybody has choices, right? You can be on a variety of different plans. So folks that aren't approaching retirement age, maybe that are going to go do this entrepreneurial journey, they could reach out to you too, and you could help them figure out health benefits and at least understand what that cost is, right? I mean, I think before you're afraid of something, you should research it and understand it, and then plan it into your cost of operations, right?
Yep. I'd
Cool.
like to make a remark on a topic just because we're dancing around this. We talked about senior people and younger people. There's this interim thing. So another solution I offer, and I have this on myself here. That's the thing. I tend to be a client first, long-term care. And
Mm,
so I was quoting it from my brother recently, and in fact, I had to go to some carriers, and everybody has this range. My older brother, he was too old for one of the carriers, and so I had to kind of reach to a clearinghouse to find. But my point is, I already bought it for myself and my wife. I'm a proponent of long-term care. What I mean is, and I'm going to speak briefly about this. If somebody can't do, like you mentioned long-term care for your father, if someone can't do two of the six activities of daily living, which are eating and bathing and dressing and transferring and bathrooming, continence, once they can't do two of those, or if it's there can be a mental issue too. Someone can't be left alone safely. My point is they need long-term care. Once you're diagnosed with that, if you have a long-term care policy or a life insurance policy with a long-term care rider, then this thing will kick in. And just like a life insurance policy, you can size it. And so my stats for you on this topic are 75% of the people over 65 are going to need some kind of long-term care. Now, the not as fun, the accountants like this number, the people don't like it as much. Statistically, we use it long-term care about less than 3 years on average. Ladies use it 3.8, almost 4 years. But my point is, I sized mine for 4 years for me and 4 years for my wife. And the reason I said, well, my point is, in other words, guys, if once you get a long-term care facility, then statistically you're only lasting a couple more years. So you don't necessarily need it. You don't need a 20-year long-term care policy potentially. But I'm a proponent of how about four? That's what I personally for. But we can show you the pricing. So you just like a life insurance policy, say I'd like a 3 year or a 4 year. You can even say, let's go with the averages, dear. If your spouse is female, she can get a 4 year policy, and the guy can go three, whatever you want to. Maybe you want to be. That's on the average.
hmm
We have longevity in my family. Okay, maybe you should go 6 years. Get 6 years each. But then what it'll do is it will pay whatever benefit level you want. So you can say, I need $5,000 or $7,000. You can check in your state and see how much the cost to carry is. That's available on search engines as well. And so I think my number is 5,000 is what I bought. So I think what I have is 4 years. I know I got that, and I think I did it at $5,000. And I don't remember if I turned on you can turn on an inflation protection, because
hmm
if you're younger, in 20 years, you may need $10,000 a month. But so my point is, I'm a proponent of people considering long-term care while they're young because it costs much less. My policy is only $100 a month. I got it when I was younger. My brother and sister-in-law, they're looking at $800 a month, even over 1,000 potentially. So my message is, while you're young, consider a long-term care policy. Get one size and consider getting it because it costs a lot more the older you get.
I love it. How about right? We're talking benefits are when a lot of companies do mid-year open enrollments. We're recording this in May, right? We're coming up for open enrollment for a lot of companies. A lot of companies are at the end of the year. Um, it's cafeteria style now, which is nice, right? I can opt
Mm-hmm.
into this, and I want medical, and I have 10 choices. I want dental, I have 3 choices. Want this, I have these choices. You also have, plans that could potentially meet their needs, right? Does it
Mm-hmm.
make any sense for folks to say, hey, here's what I have through my employer. A, is that enough? Or B, I don't know that I have a long-term care plan. I probably should,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't know that I have enough life insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ensure your employer offers you, consultation with, we have a third party company that helps consult with our employees on benefit choices and such. But
Mm-hmm.
does it make sense, especially maybe the older they get, to talk to an independent broker and
Mm-hmm.
kind of say, here's what I have from my employer. Is that enough? Is that good? What do you
Mm-hmm.
recommend? What's available to us? Or does everybody just, I feel like everybody who works for somebody who has benefits just takes whatever their employer gives them and goes,
Mm-hmm.
okay, must be good enough.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right. And so, but there are a few people who actually they do have the best. They're because the bigger the employer is, they do benchmarking stuff. They kind of want to make certain. So they often have a full featured thing. But my point is, one, most people don't know what they have. And to your point, I mean, I've been there. I was there 30 years. It's not a fun topic. It comes up. You got to get it done. There's only a few choices. I think you should know what it is. Depending on the individual, the short answer is you can probably do better. So I'm telling you, I'm talking about like even cancer policy, critical illness, these things, an accident policy. I believe someone should at least consider those. So if your employer does have them, I could take a look. Often the employer, because to your point, they have this group policy and they're getting a discount, if you will, because a number of lives protected. I think people should do that. So if your employer has some kind of supplemental solutions, at least shop those and take a look at it. And often there'll be good prices. If your employer doesn't have that, then yes, talk to someone and see which one he does have. And actually, sometimes I do this for people. Sometimes I shop. For example, I personally get a dental policy, an individual, and rather than, even though my wife is with the school district, it turns out, and it's from the same carrier, it's the same major carrier. I found that me as an independent guy, I could actually get a cheaper and slightly better
Wow.
cover. I don't know why that is, but so we literally did that. We went line by line, and whichever things are better with the big employer, we went with that one, and then whichever one is better, and when I mean either lower cost and or better coverage, then we went with that. So we have it split. I have a buddy who has works at a municipality, and they take very good care of the employees. And we've gone through, and oh, here's another little hint for your other thing. I had him do is check. What I also like is often these supplemental benefits are portable. That is potentially if you start that, you lock in this group rate, and then potentially even after you leave, if you separate or leave or whatever, you can potentially take those along as long as you continue to pay the premium. I think that's a benefit. To your point, that's a benefit that they're providing that they really don't get the retention thing because you could take it. But my point is, it's good. So yes, I think everybody should look at the benefit suite, think about which ones are. Certainly consult with somebody that can help provide guidance because sometimes people don't understand how that stuff works. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of looking at your benefits package, and yes, go outside and shop it and just do whichever one's better for you. Just stay inside if you have a lower, but yeah, go ahead and get one or two from somebody else if it's a better solution.
I love it. Yeah, I think just we're on autopilot when it comes to employee benefits, and
Hmm.
we're not on autopilot with anything else, right? Like we don't just take whatever's given to us and not shop it, right?
Or go to
Um,
the restaurant, right? You don't go get yeah, just
yeah,
bring me
yeah,
some food.
yeah, whatever you want. Yeah, just give that to
Mhm.
me. Like for instance, we had a auto insurance benefit right through our employer, and I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
I'll check that out. I have Geico.
Hmm.
I love Geico. Works really well for our family. We have way too many kids and way too many cars, and Geico just happens to have a great pricing model that works for us there. But I thought, okay, I'll go through my employer's plan, thinking it's got to have some bulk buying. No, it was horrible. It was
Hmm.
crazy more. So I did better not following what my employer offered. Um,
Hmm.
how we're coming into this age of finally, I think we're on the upward side of coming out of the COVID pandemic. But um, as a small business owner, right? How did COVID affect your business, like your ability to help folks and grow your business?
So I can remark to that, but I don't think there will be any surprises there. It forced me to be more virtual, right? And it forced my clientele also, right? And so I don't. So I have a series of solutions. I have senior citizens, then people who are under seniors, individuals, and then actually small business. So I do service all three of those. But in each instance,
Awesome.
they had to become more virtual, and so I had to engage in dialogue, whether that's sharing information, quoting, and even enrolling electronically more. But candidly, that's kind of better for me in a certain way. It's more efficient, it's time efficient. It
Hmm.
can make some conversations challenging, but so that's the thing it did for me. It made both my clients and me become more virtual, and as a result, there were some challenges. Like I think many people are now quite comfortable in a Zoom
Hmm.
environment, but initially that was a challenge for some people, right? And so, like I've got this green screen right here because sometimes I turn different stuff on, that kind of thing. But so, yeah, it made us become more virtual. I think that, and then I guess it did sensitize people though. Suddenly they're more interested in health insurance, making sure that you needed to know, unfortunately, right? So it made people more sensitized to the solutions I offer, and it made us more virtual. That's my response.
Yeah. Have you seen any? I mean, we talked about cancer kind of insurance. Is there any like COVID kind of insurances? Are you seeing any changes to any of the insurances because of COVID?
Only that some things they had to come out specifically say whether they would cover that or not. But I haven't seen any tailored to address that issue. All the major carriers would either kind of say, don't worry, that either vaccinations are covered or uh, uh, treating symptoms and illness associated with COVID either was or wasn't covered, but nothing specific.
It was interesting, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden stuff was free, which is
Yeah.
very unusual in healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Vaccinations were free, boosters were free, and it just got me going. Like, why isn't more stuff free, right, and
Mm-hmm.
covered? I've done healthcare consulting, not from an insurance perspective, but helping providers with technology and business solutions and business plans and strategy for about 25 years. And I was blown away, right? I watched the high price of medications, especially here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my wife has a couple conditions. She takes quite a few meds. And I'm always just, even with the copays, right? I'm like $35. I'm like, I know it didn't cost you $35 to formulate and produce that med. And if it did, you need some help, automating your processes. And then I went over to Mexico recently. We were down in Yuma, Arizona, and we went across the border for lunch. And the same drugs were like pennies on the dollar, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were crazy cheap down there. All the Canadians apparently go down there and get meds. There's more pharmacies than there are restaurants down there catering to medical tourism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you come back and you're just like, why aren't these drugs covered, right, by insurance, and
Mm-hmm.
why aren't necessary, especially for like ongoing conditions, right, where this person's going to have to take this drug for the
Mm-hmm.
rest of their life or they'll die, and we
Mm-hmm.
still like just charge them crazy prices.
Mm-hmm.
That was more of a rant than a question, I guess. But
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll share a couple of remarks with you. So, number one, as I mentioned in the Medicare world, how there are specific plans for what we call dual people in Medicare and Medicaid. They also have a series of plans called chronic. And so those are designed to help with that. So, in other words, and so if you just like, so it's not for everybody, but if you qualify, for example, diabetes or heart disease, they've got certain plans that are designed to help with that, if you will. And the other thing I would remark is I did spend several years in corporate America in medical device and in companies that I wasn't involved in the drug specifically. I was in testing automation though, but I have some insight. What I would offer is it is very expensive though to do the development of that stuff because they have to pay a lot of engineers, a lot of time to design it, and then really even the testing. It's one thing to formulate it. To your point, there was so much rigor. I was actually a project manager managing getting things approved by the FDA. And so I left partially for that reason because I didn't like the amount of documentation that was there. But in retrospect, I'm glad it is rigor. So they really do have to go
mm-hmm.
through some rigors uh, to do that. So those are my two offerings on that. Now, having said that, I do think that unfortunately medication still costs even too much because then there's a lot of marketing dollars spent on. In other words, there's good
Yeah.
and bad. Maybe you wouldn't spend as much money on marketing but they might argue, well, I have to because I spent so much money on the development. But my point is, I have first experience. Drug and medical device development is very expensive. I'll give them credit for that at least.
When I meet people at conferences or such where I speak about right transforming healthcare and such as a regular topic that I get to speak on, some of the older folks, they challenge me. They're like, "Why aren't you making it better?" And I just like I take that deeply personal because man, I wish I had the answer, and I don't think anyone does, and b some magic wand that I could just fix this, right? Because it's broken in so many aspects in so many ways, um, I- and I get everyone's frustration with healthcare. Um, and I think every day people like yourself try to help people find a better path through health insurance and be
Mm-hmm.
better protected, so it's not such a negative experience. I watch people go through and get patient provider experiences that leave them very frustrated, and I just want to help there. Yesterday, I spent the day talking to my daughter's medical provider who billed the wrong insurance because she has three insurance plans. Don't get me started on why she has that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and then I had to call United Healthcare and I had to call Anthem, and I was just like, guys, it's really simple. Just you provider bill the right insurance, you insurance release the claim so that this other insurance company can pay it. Let's giddy up go, right? And then I literally had to help the insurance company understand their own technology and how to release the claim. And she's like, "Oh yeah, that worked," you know. And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh." Um, and so the amount of time that we spend in healthcare just trying to stay healthy, right, or get treatment or get care, to me, I love so much just the service really that you're providing, because you're helping people at least on the financial side,
Hmm.
making sure that they make smart choices that, you know, you like me have no control over the frustrations of getting care and such, but at least you can make sure that, you know, they have a good outcome from the financial side.
Yep, and or have the information to make the best choice they can, given the different alternatives. Hmm.
I love it. So maybe could you tell us what states you mentioned? You're in 10 states. What are those
Sure.
states?
Well, so for one thing, because I speak Spanish, that's the initial part of the spread out was, so I do Florida and then I do Georgia just because it's kind of a neighbor to that. But so I do Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California because of the Spanish. I also do Oklahoma because that's north of me, and then actually Washington State, believe it or not. But that's the thing. In the insurance industry, you can get a non-resident license, but I mean, I could do all 50, right? But it doesn't necessarily make sense. I should only do it where I've already got some contact where I can be of some service to somebody. And there are actually some rigor too, depending on the product. Sometimes if it's a national product, well, not even then there's
Mhm.
hoops for me to jump through as well. So I'm not in all states at this time. If I felt the need to, I would eventually do that. But I'm always
Awesome.
willing to just trying to help somebody. I have a great referral network, so I can always put somebody in touch of, right. In other words, if they're in a state that I'm not in, I'll put you in touch with somebody that can help you.
To me, it's just such a cool profession. What you do, how you help people. Whether I know we talked a lot about the elderly, right? But
Hmm.
insurance itself is just confusing. Maybe not on the auto side or the home side.
Hmm.
I think you still need to pay attention to what you're doing over there. I've seen some people get better rates, and then I look at their coverage and I go, "You realize you dropped like half your coverage by doing this. Of
Hmm.
course, it's cheaper." And they're like, "Oh shoot, I didn't know that." Um,
Hmm.
so Tom, I want to thank you for taking all this time, helping us walk through all these aspects of you know, insurance. Um, to me, this is cool, right? I get pinged all the time by people that are like, "Hey, come sell life insurance for global life," you know, and I'm like, I have zero desire to do that.
Hmm.
But what you do kind of seems really interesting. You get to help people. It's just such a cool kind of story that you have. So I want to personally thank you for, you know, taking this venture, helping folks find the right insurance, whether seniors or not, and again sharing the knowledge that you did with us here on the podcast.
I've had a great time and I enjoyed the conversation. It's clear, partially through your personal experience, Brett, but you really know what's going on too. So you've made the dialogue very good for everybody. So thank you to you.
Oh, very cool. So again, Tom is out at Basey Insurance, BASEY dash insurance.com. You can figure out how to contact him there. He has a really cool schedule a meeting button where you can just jump on his calendar and find some time to talk to him and his team. And there's other things out there. We didn't even talk really about like life insurance or the legal service, or
Mhm.
there's something cool called Life Exec. That's also kind of cool out there. So you know, we'll maybe have to have Tom back at least to talk about some of these other things that are available. But out on the website, great way to see the offerings, and then schedule some time. Right, just talk, just reach them, and you know, it could be a quick conversation like, "Hey, I have this," and to have somebody double check what you have and go, "Nope, you're pretty good." Great. You know, now you have peace of mind. Or, hey, you know, you're kind of missing this, that, and the other, and here's how we could supplement that. Um, it's such a cool concept. So, again, Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you. Final remark is also, and then actually, if somebody wants to talk about leaving corporate America, I think this is a good career choice too. So if you want to discuss about getting into insurance and help people please reach out to me for that too.
That's awesome.